The UK has a new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. In this video, we're going to look at the astrology to see how this new player fits into the game that's going on the world stage. In this video, we are going to look at the astrology around the new Prime Minister of Britain, Keir Starmer, who came into power after a quite embarrassing defeat of the previous incumbent, Rishi Sunak, and who is now leading the UK, which is still an important country, not as important as it used to be, but they're meddling a lot, so they're kind of punching a little bit higher than their weight class would usually allow them to. So it's still an important country. You can see in world affairs, they always have their fingers into what's happening in different crises areas, in different war theaters, and in different brewing crises as well. So it's important to check and to see what this new prime minister, what he's going to bring to the table, especially given that we're living in such volatile times when we are on the brink of a large cataclysm, a potential World War III, as we are right now. And the best way to get into this is by simply jumping into the birth chart of Keir Starmer, which you can see here right now on the screen. So this is the birth chart. We don't have the time, the birth time. When you don't have the birth time, then you're somewhat limited in what you can tell, because obviously you don't know the ascendant, you don't know the houses, you don't know the MC, the midheaven, a lot of important factors that you can't assess, but you can know still about the aspects and the positions of the planets, the major planets. That's something that's still available for analysis. So you can still do a pretty decent analysis, especially if, as we're doing here, you're going to be looking at the asteroids, right? So the asteroids is really where a lot of the details, the beef really about the meta narrative, about the cosmic narrative lies that each personage, each personality is embodying in their incarnation, right? So the planets, the constellations, they give us this framework within which we can live our story, within which we can co-author our story together with the divine forces that have set the framework. And the asteroids, when you're able to read them, you get all of the kind of little detailed plot lines that are going to play out in this person's life as well, in addition to the big framework, right? So what is the plot of this person, of Keir Starmer here? Well, first of all, if we look at the actual constellations, so the first thing that we see when we look at his chart is that you got the sun with Pluto here, constellated with Pluto, and this is in an opposition to Jupiter Chiron here. You can see this very clearly. These are perfect placements, like very, very precise. The sun is actually like down to the degree on Pluto, and then exactly opposite Jupiter. It's like a textbook constellation. So what does this mean? With Sun, Pluto, Sun is the divine center of being, the consciousness that is lit, that is full of light, right? In every person, in every personality, in every human. And Pluto is the opposite, is the Hades, the underworld, the shadow, right? So when these two are constellated together, you will have to go through a necessary confrontation of the light and the darkness within yourself, right? There's no way to evade that confrontation. You will have to meet the devil, basically, right? There's no way around it in your lifetime. And, when that's the case in general with every hard aspect of Sun, Pluto that you may have in your chart, you will not have the luxury of being able to evade that fight or that confrontation. But then with Jupiter here, so Jupiter is in opposition. Jupiter opposite Pluto, you're going to get this battle, for expansion, the battle for affirming one's will. You're going to get people who have an iron will, an extremely powerful will, the will to to really move mountains, right? The will to do things that are much larger than life. You're going to get that. And this can sometimes get very fanatical. This can become extremely fanatical. So the fanatics you will find under this constellation, Pluto, Jupiter, right? Because Jupiter is also the will, the belief, your beliefs basically, right? It's not exactly will. Will is more sun, but the beliefs, right? Which then is connected to will as well, right? Your beliefs about the world, about God, about what's right for the world, all of that is Jupiter. About what's possible for yourself, all of that is Jupiter. In opposition to Pluto, it's going to have that extremely dark aspect to it, that very, obsessive type of belief, the obsessive faith, the obsessive belief, which it can be the faith that moves mountain, but it can also be the fanatic, kind of the extreme fanatic who gets obsessive about a belief that they have. And especially here with the sun with Pluto, this fanatic belief can be about good and evil, right? Oftentimes the devil plays tricks, and people who are fighting for what they think is, they think that they're in a dichotomy of good and evil. In reality, they're doing the deed of the devil. They're actually contributing to bringing more suffering into the world, while they're thinking that they're actually on the side of the good, on the side of the light. These deceptions happen a lot, especially for people when they're not yet fully introspective, and when they're not yet have attained a level of spiritual maturity where they can overstand, where they can see and transform and have transformed their inner shadow aspects, their own shadow aspects. If the shadow aspects are still untransformed, if they're still lived on a low level, on a kind of unilluminated form of existing, right? When you're not fully clear about them yet, then these kind of self-deceptions are very, very frequent, right? Very frequent. And especially you're going to have this with somebody who, as I said here, has this necessity, right, to confront the darkness within themselves, as this guy, as Keir Starmer. Now, what about how this applies to the war scenario, right? To the war scenario that we're potentially slithering into. You're going to see here that his Mars is very strong, right? His Mars gets lots of nice aspects, like a trine from Jupiter, which is going to make you very successful in any kind of bellicose affairs, in any kind of battles, a successful fighter basically. And it also gets the sextile with Pluto and the trine with Neptune, which is going to the Mars is just really powerful, right? It's very powerful, and it's all in water, with a lot of water. So he's going to be defending the nation fiercely, ferociously, with a lot of courage, with a lot of smart and kind of higher intuition as well, with Neptune being here, and with a lot of power with Pluto going in there, right? So that's all kind of looks like the chart, the horoscope of a wartime prime minister, right? Much more so than the previous guy, Rishi. Actually, if you look at this, and if you look at the other charts I'm going to show you as well now, and you put the things together, it's almost like the characters that are needed for the coming phase, they're being brought into place, right? And Rishi Sunak was still there, but he was kind of out of place. He didn't have a role in this next big phase that's coming, but this guy does, right? This guy does. This is not looking good for us as a collective humanity if we want to avoid World War III, because this guy is literally written in his chart, his destined and fated participation in such a confrontation. I'm going to show you exactly how and where. So I told you about the general kind of traits, that are there. And that's where most astrologers end. They just stay on the general traits. They don't go much deeper than that. But there are several ways to go deeper. One is the asteroids and the stars. The other is higher intuition, which you need to develop and you need to work on, right? To be able to see through the third eye, to be able to see intuitively with a higher intuition what the chart means. But I'm going to stay here right now with what we can all see, and that's the asteroids, right? And the asteroids they're speaking a super clear language, right? So this Sun Pluto, which is his kind of potential fanaticism, right? And also this kind of you're either with us or against us type of attitude, which is Sun Pluto. It's opposite here in a wide opposition to the asteroids China and Russia. You see here? Exactly in opposition to China and Russia. Okay? That's there, right? That's there. This guy's born with this, right? And he's born with this constellation as being part of his makeup, part of his psychological and destiny makeup. And then you got the Mars here, the strong Mars, right? Which is in an exact square. You see it has a square here to the asteroid Moskva. Moskva is Moscow, right? So this Mars, the bellicose Mars, exact square to Moscow, and Sun Pluto, exact opposition to China and a wide opposition to Russia, right? Okay. So that's written there. And then what are the other things here? You see here with where the Venus is. So Venus in Libra, that's where he's making like partnerships and where he's making deals and making, friends basically. Where he's making friends and partnerships, there he's got Kiev, asteroid Germania, asteroid Europa, right? And Clitia. Clitia stands for intrigues, okay? So you got Clitia, Kiev, Germania, Europa, and Venus in Libra, right? So making intrigues and making deals and partnerships, right, with the kind of known suspects, right, who are the partners, UK's partners, current partners in the global confrontations that are brewing. And against who? Against China and Russia, very clearly. That's written in his destiny, right? So this fanatic energy that I mentioned before, if it gets activated in his life, is going to get activated against China and Russia. And now there's one more thing here to look at. His sun is also with another asteroid, and that's very clear. You can see this here. It's the asteroid Israel here, right? Sun conjunct asteroid Israel, right? So Israel is not where the Venus was. Is not where the friend, the part. No, it's where the Pluto is, where the sun is, right? So Israel has an immense power over this guy. Doesn't come as a surprise, right? You're going to see that with a lot of politicians in the current leading elites of the West. Actually, the majority, they're going to exhibit this. They're going to be in some ways bound up with Israel, whether that's good for the West or not, whether that's good for the people of the West or not, that's another question. That's another question, and it's way too deep than we could look at in this video. We need to have so much more angles and perspectives, historical perspectives, to be able to get to the bottom of that. But it's very clear. When you look at the chart here, it's very clear where and what he's going to act as. Bologna, which stands for war, is on his Saturn. So Saturn is the difficult karmic test in life, right? That's with Bologna. Bologna is the war god, the Roman war goddess, right? So going into, this is going to be his big karmic challenge in life. It's going to be around war, right? It's also written in the chart. So his personal chart is pretty clear, and it doesn't bode well, as I said, for the prospects for peace if you think that Keir Starmer has now been put into place by destiny, by the forces of destiny, by the forces of time at this particular juncture in the story, with the plot thickening towards what unfortunately is brewing up on the horizon. And this is, in astrology, you can always see when there is something, when something is quite clear, then you can see that multiple times repeated again and again. It's not just one chart, right? So you're going to say, okay, you showed me this one chart. Okay, his birth chart, he had these asteroids constellated. So what? Maybe it means he just has a very intense dislike of China, but does that mean that he's going to necessarily, okay, you got a point there. It's not necessarily, it's not that deterministic. Just looking at your birth chart, seeing that some asteroids are there doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily run a campaign against this or that country and so on. There's so many different ways that this can actually play out, always, granted, right? But there is multiple, once you start to see multiple repetitions, and once you understand the big picture in which everything is acting, and you can use your intuition as well, then you can really see how everything comes together, and that space of possibilities and probabilities, which is freedom, starts to get smaller and smaller and starts to get more and more confined by the parameters of fate. Now, another chart to look at where you can see this is here, the inauguration chart. Okay, so we have the inauguration chart. We know that he was inaugurated at 12 o'clock, around noon on July 5th, 2024. So this is a exact inauguration chart for his prime ministership, right? So this is decades after he's born, right? This is not, obviously this is a completely different chart. I showed you his birth chart before. Now I'm showing you his inauguration chart. This is his inauguration chart, right? Which was last week, basically, July 5th. Now, what do you see in the inauguration chart? Look at this. Mars in the 8th house, conjunct what? Conjunct Russia and China here. Exact conjunction of Mars. Mars is what? Mars is fighting war, right? Conjunct Russia and China, right? It's here. It's very clear in the chart. And, generally he's got a sun and moon conjunction in the 10th house. So in this inauguration chart, so this prime ministership has the role and the mission of bringing the people together, right? It's about uniting the people, uniting the UK, the British people, uniting them for what? For which purpose? For which purpose? Well, the purpose is kind of written in here as well, right? So you get the Mars on Russia and China, and then you've got here the North Node. You see here, the North Node? The North Node is exactly on the asteroids Taiwan and Kiev, and that's in the 7th house. The 7th house of partnerships with North Node. North Node is where fate manifests itself, okay? 7th house partnerships, North Node, where fate manifests itself with Kiev and Taiwan, right? Partnership with Kiev and Taiwan, Mars, fighting opposition and struggle against Russia and China is written in the chart. Now, having seen these charts, it becomes pretty clear that Keir Starmer, he has replaced the previous guy who was kind of a tourist, more of a tourist in that position, right? Where he's probably now on an island with his billionaire wife, on a private island. And Rishi Sunak is out of the picture, and instead Keir Starmer is leading this country. He looks like a good guy. He looks like a conscientious guy. He looks like a guy who's kind of, there to do the right thing. And he might actually believe that himself. Right? As I said in the beginning, if and when people have not yet developed a high level of spiritual maturity, then they are constantly going to be deceived about their own motives and motivations, right? They will not see certain darknesses that exist within them, and they will think that they're doing the right thing while they're actually contributing to quite sinister plans or to quite sinister forces. Oftentimes, certainly there's going to be a lot of very powerful people behind the scenes who actually call the shots and make the moves, which is not necessarily the person that you're going to see on the TVs giving the interviews and being the face of the story. But that being said, the face, which is the prime minister, is now somebody whose destiny fits into this unfortunate constellation that we're going into with the coming years, where a great confrontation is becoming more and more likely. Now, as sad as that is, that's the reality. We have to face it. We have to analyze it. We have to prepare for it, for ourselves, for our families, and also with the decisions and the moves that we make to counter these events and to create a viable and meaningful alternative for the future. Now, I look forward to exploring all of this with you in much more detail in future videos. Until then, be well, be blessed.